this is Brendan from Whiteboard Training, and in this tutorial we take a look at whiteboard diagrams for driver training. Drawing whiteboard diagrams is a simple but highly effective learning strategy. It assists the learner to process information in multiple ways. First of all, let's go through some general instructional techniques. Keep it simple and focus on what matters. Be concise. Present the information clearly in as few words as possible without skimping on the content. Be clear. Don't complicate the message. Break information down into bite-sized pieces. Don't try to achieve too much too soon. Be patient and progress at the rate the learner can manage. What I'm going to go through now is some of my key driver training focal points for learner drivers. First of all, I want to make sure that the learner can do a cabin drill and knows what the controls are. Next, one of my objectives is to make the person more familiar with the particular vehicle that they are training in, to gain some knowledge and understanding and appreciation. Then, a really major component of the training will be developing the students' observation and scanning skills, helping them understand what are blind spots, what are blockouts, and the importance of shoulder checks, also known as head checks. I want to make sure that they can adequately move off and stop in a safe and correct manner, that they can depart the curb and return, that they can signal correctly, they can observe and interpret warning signs and regulatory signs. They understand and can apply the concepts of give way and stop, whether they be lines marked on the road or signage, whether they be marked or unmarked situations. Assisting the student in developing safe and appropriate road positioning skills, and managing their speed and their space. We also work on left and right turns in various situations such as T-sections and roundabouts. Develop the system of vehicle control. Help them in situations like intersections, whether they be controlled by traffic lights or uncontrolled. How to merge and diverge. How to do maneuvers. How to manage bus stops. School zones. Judging traffic lights, whether it be straight ahead, left, right, or where permitted U-turn. Bicycle rules, overtaking cyclists, for example, riding along the side of the road. And sharing the road with other road users. So we've already mentioned bicycles and we've mentioned buses. There's also heavy vehicles, there's pedestrians, there's scooters, etc. So we've also got to learn to be part of the road system with all the different road users. Okay, let's take a look at some whiteboard diagram examples. So these are some of the ones that I've utilized during my training, and I'm just going to share those with you now. So this is the first one where we went through the cabin drill and controls, and what I was effectively doing was going through the controls and trying to structure up the framework of that. And you can see the top left, 3 S's: seat, steering wheel, seatbelt, and mirrors. We covered the console controls, the dash controls, the steering wheel controls, the gears, the handbrake, the pedals, and also down the bottom left, the must know, need to know, and nice to know. I'll talk more about that shortly. Over on the right hand side are the dot points of what would be covered, and in the bottom right is a diagram that I also utilize quite often. So along with your whiteboard diagrams, which by the way you could do on an iPad, no problem at all, these just happen to be on the whiteboard. We've got the diagram there, which I will use at times as well anyway. So when I'm sitting in the left seat of a driver training vehicle, I'll have laminated diagrams that I can call upon if and when required. So this is the example that I give here. Look, you can use diagrams with text or without text. Also, you can see the use of color. So the yellow box there sort of draws the eye to it as well. A lot of trainers won't need the text once they're training regularly, excuse me, they will be able to work off a diagram. But having a visual element has a strong impact, and that's the whole point I'm trying to make. And also, this links into getting the students to set up their mirrors correctly as well. So coming back to those key focal points, the driver needs to be correctly set up. This is something I picked up when I was doing the TAE Training the Trainer course many years ago. It was in the content, and I haven't been able to find who actually came up with this as a source of reference, but there's a pyramid triangle of priority, and that is, we have down the bottom the nice to know, all the nice to know things about vehicles. For example, there might be a heater in the seat, for example. That's nice to know, but is it essential? Is it the most important information? Well, one would have to weigh that up. And then there are a lot of nice to know, so that's the biggest part of the triangle down the bottom. And then in the middle we have the need to know, which are important things. So for example, you need to know where the wipers are, but if it's not raining, then that wouldn't be essential on that particular day. But that doesn't mean that it's not important. You still need to know it, but maybe you don't utilize it all the time. Whereas the must-knows, if you're going to be driving a car, you're going to be using certain components all the time. For example, the brake, the accelerator, the steering wheel, the indicators, and so on. So they're all the must-knows. Observation and scanning would be a must-know. Mirror checks would be a must-know. Head checks / shoulder checks would be a must-know, and so on. So when I'm training, I'm always trying to think, what's the most important thing that a person needs to know to drive them forward in their training program? What's the most important thing that they need to know to keep them safe, to keep them alive, etc. When I'm training someone to drive a car, I always think, if I was training someone to use a chainsaw, which is a high, there's a risk element to that, what would I be telling them? If I was telling someone how to go out into the surf, where you've got rips and waves and blue bottles and sharks and all sorts of things, what would I be telling them? What's the most important information? So you'd be saying, for example, well, swim between the flags, etc. So always frame up of what is the most important. The must knows is the priority, then the need to knows, and the nice to knows. Being able to weave that information in strategically really is one of the skills of a high-level trainer. Here we've got a whiteboard diagram that I constructed as I explained it on a curve departure technique. And you can see over there we've got the mirror indicator, mirror shoulder check on the far left. We've got a circle that I've drawn, and that shows making sure that the driver has a scanning of 360 of the vehicle. And also we can see that I've got a little rectangle which is the vehicle showing the direction of travel with the arrow, and the two little crosses on the side showing the indicators. You can see up the top right I've said, is it safe? Make quick checks, and 5 seconds notice on the indicator, and also put in a contingency there where if a driver didn't do a shoulder check, if there was a driveway on their back right, so I'll just put the cursor over here, then the driver needs to look over in case someone comes out of that driveway, for example. Now, someone might say, if someone's on a Harley Davidson, we would hear it, but if someone rode a bicycle out there into your blind spot, you wouldn't hear it. So that's where the visual element's critical. Over on the right side of the diagram, coupled with my explanation of curve departure, there's the instructions for the step-by-step on how to perform that. So if you compare a whiteboard diagram, that's the visual, and on the right is the step-by-step. Just like you're doing a recipe for, baking a cake or something like that. You've got the recipe and then you've got the visual element. This one here is one of my diagrams that I actually use on those 6-point checks. So the front, the rear, left mirror, left shoulder, right shoulder as well. So that again is a high priority for me to get that across to the student, because when you're driving on the road, the observation and scanning is critical. Curve departure, curve return is a basic skill. We're going to be using that throughout a range of maneuvers. So once they've got that down pat, they can apply that. They need to also be aware of their blind spots and manage those. If the student doesn't know why they're doing a shoulder check / head check, then to them it's just a monkey see, monkey do element. So we want to put a little bit of meaning behind why they're doing what they're doing. So drivers must conduct shoulder checks prior to moving off from the side of the road, lane changes, as well as prior to conducting maneuvers to identify and manage hazards safely. So there we have our driver looking at the motorcycle, for example. Core skill of a driver. Move your head. Effective scanning means a driver constantly moves their eyes and or their head when driving so that they can detect hazards that may arise ahead, to the sides and behind their vehicle. So again, we want to leave the curb safely. We want to pull into the curb safely. Okay, this is a diagram I use to explain road positioning, and we can see here we've got a parked car on the left side of the road. Our car is coming down the road, and you can see the tracking by the broken line going around the vehicle. And you can see the text in the middle at the bottom says, look ahead, is it all clear? And then what I've explained to my student is that we have a broken line. Therefore, if we cross the broken line, we indicate her. If there is no broken line, we're not required to indicate. And we're responsible for making sure that there's a safe space to go around there. Now, on the right, I've got the actual diagram of my standard road positioning that I use on my laminated diagrams. At the top, the text says the vehicle should be in the correct road position appropriate to the road or traffic situation. So the driver needs to actually assess what they're working with and then make decisions about their positioning. Down the bottom, vehicle positioning on laned and unlaned roads. Keep the vehicle as near as possible to the left on an unlaned road without necessarily obstructing other traffic. Keep the vehicle wholly within the marked lane when travelling straight or in bends, and use the space within the lane to maintain safety margins. Okay, remember the three-step approach for these situations for hazard recognition and decision making. Number 1, scan ahead. Number 2, recognise the hazards. And number 3, respond. So let's look at each of those. Continue to scan the road environment and identify risks when driving at all times. Recognise the difference between potential hazards and hazards that require you to respond. A hazard can be any potential source of danger on or near the road that could lead to a crash. A hazard can come from any direction. And respond. Recognising a hazard early allows you to make a well-informed decision on the safest way to respond. That could be to slow down, stop, or change lanes. Okay, this diagram we're looking at road position and giving way. So this time I've drawn a diagram with a parked car, and we've got our vehicle moving along, and you can see the key word there is to give way, to make sure there's sufficient space. So our vehicle is pulled up, we'll let the vehicle here, which I'll use the cursor with, to come through, and then once that's clear, we proceed. So again, we use the three-step approach. If there's a broken line and we cross it, even partially, we indicate. No broken line, no indicator. Let's have a look at our give way. So just to put it into context, as I'm drawing my whiteboard diagram, this is some of the content that I would be going through with the driver. Give way means to slow down and, if necessary, stop in order to prevent a crash from happening. Now, I can specifically recall where I was doing this. It was in a residential area. A lot of early lessons for learner drivers will be where they live, which is usually in residential areas, not always, but mostly. So we were dealing with a lot of unmarked road situations, 50 zones, etc. And sometimes there were cars parked on both sides of the road, and space was an issue for us. So this was me wanting to make sure that road positioning and give way were managed early, because I knew this was going to come up a lot. You must always give way at a give way sign and check it's safe to continue. And give way signs are placed at intersections and other places where other vehicles have priority. So that's not exactly applicable to this, but this is just giving you an idea of what I'm reinforcing. Because sooner or later, you're going to get to a give way or a stop sign. So managing a stop sign at an intersection. And you can see in this diagram, I've drawn a solid white line here, which is the stop line. I've written stop over here, and I've made a point that it's a stop and look situation to try and make it that it's not stop just because someone told me to, but I'm actually stopping for a safety motive and then looking. This would have been Nelson and Taylor would have been the street names to assist the orientation with the student. And I've also made a point here of this would be a left turn position, straight ahead position, and a right turn position. So starting position for the maneuver, you can see that we're stopping behind the stop line and looking, and then we've got a broken line here. So if it's safe to do so, the student can move forward up to this situation. If there's any parked cars along here, it sets that they need to lean forward and look before committing to right, left, or straight ahead. Also, I've drawn a bicycle in here to make sure that they look, because if a bicycle rider's coming along, we want to keep them safe. So let's go to the text over here. Correctly position the vehicle at stop lines associated with stop signs, crossings and traffic lights. Adopt correct road position at intersections when the view is obstructed, and demonstrate the correct approach and turn positions for turning left and right at intersections in accordance with the law. So again, we've got the text on the right, and I'm taking that information, my knowledge of that information as a trainer, and I am representing that on the whiteboard diagram and explaining it to the student. Now, something I should add is I'm not just randomly doing these. I am strategically pulling up on the side of the road before I get to these situations in a safe location, securing the vehicle, and we're talking it through first, and then once we're set up, we are then going and executing the maneuver. Now, in a situation like this, if it was depending on the level of the student, if I wanted to give them the easiest option to manage, it would be the left, because we're not having to cross the line of traffic. So the left is scanning and then making sure it's all clear, and around we go. And then I would do the straight ahead and right. Just wouldn't really matter to what order. Maybe let's go 1, 2, 3. Sometimes what I'll do is even drive around the block. So I'll do left, then I'll go straight, and then I'll double back around and do the right later on. Or we could have actually even done it from this side of the road. But once that intersection becomes familiar to the student, their eyes will see more and more the more they are exposed to that situation, and the more they'll learn to look for those key pieces of information, as well as making decisions at intersections. Okay, this one here, it's a bit of a crazy diagram, so this is where some people get all self-conscious about their artwork, but the most important thing that trainers need to remember is that the diagram's actually for the student, it's not for them. And sometimes their internal self-critic can get in the way of them saying, I've got to get the message across. Now, I was given a gift as a trainer once, and that was I had to teach a person who was profoundly deaf. And I'm someone who can talk a lot, but when you've got someone who's deaf and talking is not the solution, then you start to realize you've got to look at other ways of communicating. And this is one of the takeaways from that experience from me. So first-hand experience taught me the power of actually visually getting these messages across. So if we go to our diagram, just use the cursor here. So the first thing is move your head. So this is a car coming up here, and what we were doing is coming up. There was a grassy area, a driveway, a footpath, and then we were turning into the road, let's say. So here's the pedestrians that were coming along the footpath. So the first thing we're doing is we're pausing here. We were looking, using our peripheral vision, moving our head, making sure it's all clear, creeping up. Now there's the right indicator. So if we were going right, we were still looking left, looking right, and making sure it was clear that we could go. There was a parked vehicle just here on the side of the road. So as we came up, we had to look behind the vehicle firstly, and then we had to creep forward and then look in front of the vehicle. So that's one of the skills that a learner needs to develop, is to come out of the driveway, look for pedestrians, look behind the parked car to the left, creep forward, look across the front of the parked car up the road so that they get a clear view before committing. This is an example of where that would play out in reality for a student. We've got the exit out of the Sherwood Transport Department in Queensland. So here's our footpath down the bottom. Here's the parked car on the left. And this is the Transport Department car park we're getting out of. Now this has got a give way to pedestrian sign telling us what to do. But as a trainer, I've had people actually swipe the back end of a vehicle here, so they've got to get out, move around the corner here safely. So this is actually should be a major part of any trainer's training program, is how to get in and out of a transport department safely. This is Caloundra. You're coming up the hill on the left there, and you've got a stop sign and a big fence. And I've taken a second photo there to show you what you can see when you actually get up to the fence. So again, you need to make sure your student can get in and get out of driveways, private property, and they understand the rules for how to maintain them safely, and most of all keep themselves and other people safe. Okay, let's go through single lane roundabouts. So this, it looks a little bit messy here, but this is us here, L for learner. And I've talked about positioning, whether it be a left turn, straight ahead, or right turn. This is Blaxland, this is up at Caloundra. And here's our learner. If they go straight ahead, we can see that the indicator comes on here to depart. There's actually a pedestrian crossing over here. So this one was a good challenge about scanning ahead, and there was a school around there somewhere as well. Orange signs and markings, warning, roundabout, give way to all vehicles on the roundabout. So what we also covered here was, what if there was a vehicle in position A? What if there was a vehicle in position B? So we talked a lot about give way and managing space. And down here, I went through the signalling straight ahead, no indicator when you come on, left indicator to come off. Number 2, left turn, left indicator on, left indicator off. And number 3, for a right turn, right indicator on the approach and left to depart. Turning at unlaned roundabouts, comply with give way signalling and positioning laws at unlaned roundabouts. Negotiate every roundabout at a safe speed under full control. Look in the appropriate directions when approaching and during turns at roundabouts. Comply with the system of vehicle control. Travelling straight on a roundabout, comply with the giving way rules, signalling arrows, lanes and positioning laws appropriate and in the roundabout. Approaching and in the roundabout. Negotiate every roundabout in a safe speed under full control. Look in the appropriate directions when approaching and proceeding through roundabouts, and comply with the system of vehicle control. So when you drive around a place like Caloundra, Pelican Waters, you must be able to manage roundabouts safely. There's so many of them. Places like Redcliffe, lots of roundabouts. So that's a priority for me, is to be able to safely manage those. Okay, forgive my spelling up here of reverse. It's a bit embarrassing, but again, the diagram's probably the focus. I probably should chop that off in my edit, but anyway. This diagram shows the straight line reverse that they do in Queensland. I know other states have different manoeuvres, but the point here is that the criteria says we have to reverse along a straight stretch of road for a distance of between 25 to 30 metres, staying within approximately 50 centimetres of the curb. So let's take a look at our starting position. Within 50 centimetres of the curb, select reverse, go slow, back, I've written 20 to 30, it's 25 to 30. I've only been instructing since the 90s. Sorry about that. Mostly look out the back window and stop and give way if someone comes up the road. So again, trying to set up the maneuver for success. Okay, we're back onto an intersection here. I'll just see if I've got any new info here that I haven't covered. This is a turning left situation. We can't give way sign, not a stop sign. Check the pedestrians. Don't have to stop. Okay, so the difference here between the earlier one was we had stop signs, here we have a give way. So we're saying if it's safe to go, that away we go, but we've got possibly a vehicle here, what's it doing, where's it going, and a vehicle here. So I would have been going through the concept of give way on the left-hand turn here. When you're turning left at an intersection without signs, you must give way to vehicles on your right. You must also give way to pedestrians crossing the road you're turning into. Okay, we also encountered bus stops. Now, some people would say, well, why do you need to know bus stop distance rules? That's irrelevant. Well, there's a little bit of a thought process here that while I was covering that off, what I'm actually trying to do is, like, I pulled up the vehicle parked before the bus stop in a legal parking position, and I asked the student the question where we could legally park. Now, sometimes it's actually marked off at some bus stops, and other times it's not marked off. So in this one, it wasn't marked off. So I said, what are our parking distance rules for before and after the bus stop? And we worked through that together, and 20 on the approach and 10 on the departure. We talked about the tail swing of the vehicle and manoeuvring the vehicle in and out, why you would need 20 to get the full vehicle in and then straighten out, and then when you're coming out, you only need 10 because you snap the nose out, but the tail swings, and then out we go. So we cover that. But what I'm really trying to do is get the learner thinking about looking for buses, especially going in and coming out of bus stops. So we're also covering what if someone runs around the front of the bus? What if the bus isn't fully up next to the curb and takes a little bit of the road? Well, we've already covered positioning earlier and so on. And we've also covered that 3-step hazard identification process. So bus stops, excuse me, you are not permitted to park or stop within 20 metres before or 10 metres after a bus stop unless signs tell you otherwise. These distances allow buses to access bus stop so that passengers can safely get off or on the bus from the footpath. So even though we're talking buses, we're also talking give way, we're talking managing space, and we're talking pedestrians. Okay, this diagram here is not so much teaching. This was when I actually assessed the learner. So we're talking formative assessment, which is informal. So it wasn't for any particular point. But what was happening was I was directing the driver around. I said, just give me your best driving, do your best to manage the situation. And as we went along, we had a bicycle rider on our left, and I asked the question about what distance we should be leaving. And there was a little bit of confusion from the student. So I wrote down the answer on the whiteboard, didn't really make a big deal of it. Then I asked about the safe distance between us and a parked vehicle on the side of the road. The student wasn't really sure of that one, so I wrote that down just as my own reference. And then the final one was we took a left turn, and you can see this at the bottom of the whiteboard, a left turn into a street, and I didn't see a shoulder check / head check from the learner, and there was a bike lane there, so I wanted to address that issue with them. So that was my 3 pieces of feedback. So when I pulled up, I went through that, and again, the first piece of information about the bicycle distances, that's not a diagram, that's actually just information, and what I want is the student to see that. Now I took a photo of that whiteboard and I sent it to the student as a text and said, when you get home, I want you to, make sure you learn these 3 things for next time. So it's a prompter for them as well. So let's take a look here. So this is the content. When the speed limit is 60 kilometers per hour or under, motorists must leave a gap of at least 1 meter between their vehicle and the bicycle riders when passing. When the speed limit is over 60, the gap must be at least 1.5 meters. Maintaining safe following distance and safety margins. Allow a safety margin of at least 1.2 meters where practicable when passing objects, vehicles, or bicycle riders. Again, so there's the content that I wanted to get across through my diagram. And this isn't Caloundra where the incident happened. This is actually Redcliffe, near the high school there, actually coming along Oxley Avenue. And I took this photo. We're on a green light, and you can see we have this orange bicycle symbol here, giving us a warning because there is a school area. So the driver would be expected as part of the system of vehicle control to do a left shoulder check in this situation, checking for bikes. Turning right into intersections. So I've got a couple of notes here. Use of colour to highlight key information. So you can see there's a red line here and a blue line here. So one of the values of having a couple of different colour pens is you can contrast information. So my eyes are actually drawn to 3 different colour lines. So I've got a black, a blue, and a red. So the red is the one that we don't want, cutting the corner there. The blue is the ideal that we're looking for, and the black is just outlined to the student what the vehicle at the stop line there is intending to do. Note that there's X's for indicators and that there's minimal text, don't cut. Okay, that's the end of the tutorial on drawing whiteboard diagrams as part of the training process. Thanks for watching. This has been Brendan from Watto Training.